We'll just go live and we'll see how that goes. Alrighty, good evening everyone. Presentation will start in a little bit. We're just starting the stream here for people to be able to join in. If you're watching this pre-recorded, it'll be about 15 minutes. You'll want to jump ahead for the actual presentation start. Alright, we'll talk to you in a bit. All right, one more audio test here as we're getting our equipment set up. We're about 10 minutes away from the start of the presentation. Feel free to join the chat. If you've got any preliminary questions, feel free to post those. Otherwise, we'll be pausing throughout the presentation for taking questions from both in-person attendees and those joining on the live stream. But again, yeah, we're about 10 minutes away from our start. Alrighty. Good evening, everyone. We'll get started here. My name is Brooks Boyd. I'll be the presenter for this evening. First, I want to thank where we're presenting from right now is the co-working space called 100 State here in Madison, Wisconsin, which is a great business incubator co-working space establishment that has been doing some great things to help foster crypto development and wanting to create a more friendly environment for that. So very much thank you for the space to be able to present for that tonight. And so for tonight, the presentation, Non-Fungible Tokens and You, I'll be taking through a few things. Let's start with the why should you listen to me slide. My name is Brooks Boyd. For the general technical piece of it, I am a developer and I've been in the cryptocurrency space in general since about 2012. That was when I first heard about Bitcoin and started working on some projects with that. I actually did some development on some altcoins back when you were literally forking the entire chain and making your own chain for those. And in more recent years, I've been doing more front-end interfaces for various cryptocurrency projects and a lot of Solidity smart contract development for Ethereum. As far as my reputation, or if you've wanting to check in on my references or wanting to continue this conversation, I'm Midnight Lightning on the Madison Blockchain Discord. I'm also Midnight426 on Twitter. Feel free to follow up with me on any of those. I'd love to continue the conversation there. For this particular topic of NFTs, why you should listen to me, some of the experience that I have in this space. For myself, I acquired my first NFT by rescuing it, as the verb went for this particular project, back in August of 2017. And I know the exact timestamp there because this is blockchain technology. Everything is timestamped perfectly. So in preparing this presentation, of course, I can go back and get you the exact moment that I acquired it. More recently, as a part-time position, I've actually joined the Ponderware development team. Ponderware is the team that's been fostering that actual project. That was that first crypto that I acquired, the MoonCat rescue project. I'm now one of their developers and continuing to foster growth with it. And so that orange MoonCat was my first MoonCat, and now the blue MoonCat is the one that I've been using as my avatar now as the Ponderware representative going forward. So if you've heard of me on either of those, there's another reference for you. So stepping forward, what I want to cover tonight, from the responses that I received for the sort of pre-question for this presentation of do you own an NFT already, it was about 50-50 on people who already own them. So the audience for this one I'm taking to be mostly people who are interested or maybe have a few, but that also wanting to cover kind of from a basic to an intermediate perspective of what is an NFT. And so yeah, that first bullet point, to make sure that we're all on the same page of what actually are we talking about. I think it is important to lay some good foundations there. And also, lots of people have been trying to take a stab at that. I'm going to give it my best go of, can we actually define this to make this understandable for people? Then once we've got that foundation, taking a look at, well, how should you be evaluating NFTs? If you see them listed on the marketplaces or referenced, how can we evaluate them? Or how to also investigate more deeply once you have found one that you're interested in or just want to know more about, what tools and sites are available for going into that further. Here at the beginning, I'll let you know, yes, there is an NFT for attending. I'll go into this more, and this slide will also be later in the presentation. If you are already familiar with the POAP protocol and are familiar with that one, you'll need to join our Discord, talk to the POAP bot, and get a code, and you'll receive an NFT that is a proof that you attended this presentation. And hopefully by the end of it, you'll be able to understand what that means or what you can do with it. If you want to start that process of acquiring it, your first step, you'll need to jump into the Madison Blockchain Discord. There's a link there. I think we'll get James also to post it into the live chat if you need the link there. Once you're in the Madison Blockchain Discord, if you look on the right-hand side where those the list of users is, in the collection of bots, you'll find the POAP bot. Right-click them, message them. The secret word is Midnight, my nickname. And they will give you a link to grab the POAP for this meeting. So feel free to do that while you're listening for the rest of this. And again, there'll be another slide and people around to help if you need help with that later on in the process here. If you're watching this pre-recorded, that won't be available. This is just for the people who are watching it and attending live. So, at first, what is an NFT? It's been in the news a lot. And part of the reason why we thought this presentation was needed is, yeah, lots of mainstream media have tried. I pulled these descriptions, not necessarily from headlines, but actually from the bodies of articles of mainstream media trying to define these things. And there's been a lot of attempts to describe NFTs. And I think in general, all of these, while not completely false, they kind of fall short of the mark of what we're actually trying to describe. So I'd say that all of these are generally kind of a bad description of what an NFT is. And here's why I would say each of these is a bad description or leaves something to be desired. As people have been learning about NFTs, I think we have the problem of the blind guys discovering an elephant. As the parable goes, if you have a bunch of blindfolded gentlemen or blind people who have never heard of an elephant are then led to an elephant and explore it, if they're only looking at one small area of it, like the guy on the far left says, oh, I feel this trunk object, and oh, elephants are like snakes because they're long and flexible. The person who feels the ears thinks, oh, they're kind of like a rug, sort of thing. Everyone sees their own little small section of it and fails to put them all together into a bigger picture. And that's what generally the mainstream media has been doing, is they see the ones that have been big and splashy and they have gotten lots of coverage, so they're focusing very closely in on a few things. So a lot of these, like saying, an NFT is a digital asset that represents a real world object. Well, yes, many are, but not all. And so it's the question of a lot of these sensationalized media coverages, they make these statements like they apply to all NFTs. And they may apply to some or most, but generally not all. And so let's actually take a look at what actually we are talking about. So to get the larger perspective of what we're looking at, NFT, non-fungible token, as its full definition is the technology or the medium that's being used. So when you say, that thing is an NFT, it's the same as saying, that thing is a website. You can get some sort of base understanding of it, but it isn't actually very specific. Same as saying, that thing uses HTTP. Now, we in this day and age kind of know, HTTP is the medium or the technology that websites are delivered to us with. But you don't need to understand HTTP to use a website. There's a difference between how the website got to you and what you as a user do with the website. So when someone says, that's an NFT, you need more information than that, because it's essentially like saying, I visited a website. Was it a search engine? Was it an e-commerce site? Was it any of these other things? And so all of these news headlines talking these way, it'd be the same as a publication saying, a website is a place you go to where you give a credit card number and your shipping address, and then you can order bananas to your front door. I was like, well, yes, there may be websites that do that, but that's not all websites. And like even ones that do ship you bananas may not need your credit card number. They may take a different payment method. So NFTs are the technology layer. And so I, as a developer, have spent a lot of time looking at the technology layer. And in this presentation, I'm not going to talk about that layer very much, because it's that same idea of you don't need to necessarily know how they work in order to know what you're supposed to be doing with them or how to react to them. So I'll be focusing mainly on the consumer side of it, of once an NFT has been created by a developer, what does that mean for you as a potential user or consumer of it? So back to the what is an NFT? So what is an NFT, the technology? Here's one where I think Merriam-Webster actually nailed it very well. So good job, a dictionary actually defined a term very well. They did their job well. Merriam-Webster defines it as a unique digital identifier that cannot be copied, substituted, or subdivided, that is recorded in a blockchain. Very good. That's the technology, that's the underlying substructure. In other words, an NFT is a serial number. It's a number, it's an identifier, as Merriam-Webster says, a digital identifier. So me saying an NFT is a serial number, that leads to okay, it's a number. Why do I care? Why is there all of this hype if really what it is a number? Well, the serial number, when we think of a serial number in most of our day-to-day lives, we think of serial numbers as something that either is goes to some specific types of items, but not all items, or also the idea if there's potential for fraud if a serial number gets removed or filed off or those sorts of things. The technology layer of NFTs is a more close to an ideal serial number, in that, as Merriam-Webster says, you cannot copy it, substitute it, or subdivide it. An NFT's number is permanently fused to the thing that it's defining. So when we normally think about a serial number, you really also need to think about the thing it's attached to. So in truth, the NFT is the number, what you're getting access to. But because it is permanently fused to something, part of its value has to be in, well, what is it fused to? Because it's a serial number on a thing, you can't look at just the number in isolation. So let's go through a couple of examples of what are NFTs like. I pulled together some real world examples that focus on a couple of different aspects of it. The one that I think that is the best analogy for a NFT that most people have already had experience with is a car VIN, the vehicle identification number on your car. As you all know, if you've purchased a car or if you've associated with a car, each vehicle has a number supposedly permanently fused to the car. Ideally, it's going to be permanent and unchangeable. And when you go to buy a car, the whole legal process of filling out a whole bunch of paperwork and getting an official looking document is really tied to the VIN number, the VIN of the car. And so really you're buying a number. And so in that sense, that's very similar to what we see with NFTs. The number is what's important. It identifies the car. But most people don't go shopping because, ooh, this one has a letter X in the number. I like the letter X in my vehicle identification numbers. In that sense, the number itself, for our cars, it's mainly the link between, we have a very robust legal process of buying a car, getting the title to the car, you know where those records are. So the parallels here of NFTs are like vehicle identification numbers in that there is a very strong purchase history. It's a very strong link between the two, and it's near permanently attached to the thing it's a part of. This also illustrates the concept of, well, what would you pay for this? If I show you, here's this vehicle identification number, it's XX29J9. Offer me some amount of money. Where would you even start at that? The savvy purchaser would probably do something like, well, I need to know what it's attached to. Because if it's attached to that, or if it's attached to that, that matters. And it's going to be wildly different even though both are VIN numbers, or both are VINs. The last N is number. Saying VIN number is redundant. So that concept of how the number and the thing are intertwined and that history of provenance is very similar to NFTs. NFTs do some more. NFTs are also like sports collectibles. So even if you personally don't have any of these, probably from your adult life, you probably understand what that is just looking at it. It's a baseball card. And some other things of, well, someone put it in a plastic enclosure. So, which usually that signals someone thought it was worth something. This particular card, it has some worth to somebody. So if I were to start saying, okay, well, what is this worth? It's not just a piece of cardboard. It actually, with someone's picture on it, it may not be the best picture of that particular player. But the things that are important about what makes a baseball card valuable would be things like, is it early in this person's career or later? Is it their rookie card or is it later in their career? What is the condition of the card? This particular one, it says it's a mint grading on the actual tag of it. So the collectability of baseball cards depends on some of this metadata about it. Who is it? How old is it? What condition is it in? What is the history of it? But also, again, you can see a reference here of, well, when you go to buy a baseball card like this particular card has been tagged, and it has a number. So really, are you buying this card or are you buying the number? And the money you pay is you expect to get that specific baseball card and not another one that looks similar to it. You want that one when you put your money in it. So there's that piece of, you're paying for a number, but it has some metadata about it. The collectability piece of it is also the case of the person who may want this may also value it for, I have an experience with this team. I want to collect all of a particular player or all of a particular team. And that's what we've been seeing recently with a lot of the NFT purchases, is people may be interested in, I want a whole set, or I want to support my favorite team, or some of the funding goes towards a particular project. I support my project, I get to show my team pennant. That some of them are examples of showing camaraderie with a group. So NFTs have that aspect to them as well. NFTs are like fine art. And this is one that the mainstream media and lots of people have made this sort of parallel. And I do agree, NFTs are a lot like fine art. I think the problem with the parallel is most of the people jump to saying NFTs are like the Mona Lisa. And I say that's not the greatest parallel because it falls apart rather quickly. So the part that it is actually a good parallel is that we know it's very easy to tell a copyright or the counterfeit from the original. With the Mona Lisa, that has a very clear provenance, very clear where it's been. Most people know the real one is hanging on the wall in the Louvre, that the real one is that one. And most people who, when they wish to make a copy of it, there's some very good prints and some very good canvas prints of it, but it's very easy to tell this one is not oil on wood. The real one is oil on wood, and there's very few people who would even try to make a duplicate that's down to the degree of the brush strokes or the crack patterns of the actual original. Most people who want to have a copy of the Mona Lisa on their wall don't really care to that level of detail if it's a copy. And so when NFTs being digital, a lot of the counter arguments are oh yes, I can completely copy, a JPEG is able to be duplicated pixel for pixel perfectly, whereas the Mona Lisa really can't. And so that kind of falls apart there. But the part where NFTs are similar to the Mona Lisa is that idea of, on a public ledger, it's just like how everybody knows where the real one is. The blockchain technology under it does give that sort of provenance and that sort of public availability for all of these records. Let's see if I can get a better parallel for fine art. Oh yes, other sorts of duplicates of the Mona Lisa are very clearly not the Mona Lisa. I think a better parallel for how NFTs are like fine art is to actually go for lithograph prints. M.C. Escher is another famous artist. A lot of his works were lithographs, and those sort of pieces are prints. They're actually go through a printing press, and you can make multiple copies of it. And so this particular work, Waterfall, which is impossible, that one didn't actually go through. Let's go through. This particular one, for the people here who can see that, his waterfall piece is a lithograph. And so not just one of them exists. There's actually been multiple print runs of that piece. And so if you look, like for example, this one, the 12th print of the third run sold for $33,000, and the 77th print of the third run sold for $30,000. And there was the second run, as opposed to the third run, the 39th sold for $25,000. This idea, there's not just one copy of Waterfalls floating around, there's several hundred. And the trick is all of them are genuine, or rather, all the ones that you can see in the bottom corner there, they have Escher's signature on them. He chose how many to make, and he actually put in the bottom corners there, you can see the second run only had 52 runs. This is the 39th out of 52. If someone shows up with the 70th in the second run, we know that's false because all the other ones show that there's only 52 of those. There was a third run. He chose to make several hundred of them, but it was up to him as an artist of how many he wanted to make. And all of them are genuine, of the ones that he made. But so you can draw that line between the prints that Escher made, which are all on paper, all are ink, and ones that people make that are high quality prints now, which would be paper with ink. And in that sense, just as good as having an Escher on your wall, but they aren't made by Escher. In the art world, it's very easy to tell most of the time the difference between the two, even though both are paper, both are printed, sort of an idea. But in the NFT art space, you do have the ability for the artist to choose how many of the thing exist. And even if they visually look the same, all of them look like waterfalls, the identifying numbers on them are all unique. And so even if the basic human reaction to it is, oh, they're all the same, the underlying identifiers can be different, and you can track their history individually that way. So yes, NFTs are like lithographs in that sense. NFTs are like concert tickets. This again gets the idea of you're buying a number and it has a graphic attached to it. When you buy a ticket, it might have a graphic attached to it, like this lovely Justin Bieber ticket. But really when you know what you're buying, or when push comes to shove, how you're going to get into the venue, is they're going to scan the right half of that ticket, and you're going to get in or not based on whether that number is in their database of allowed into this event. And so in that sense, what you're buying is the number and not necessarily the picture that's attached to it, or you're buying the number with the expectation of an experience or being part of a membership or being allowed into an area with that. Some NFTs are like that as well. And you also know, yeah, if there is a ticket for the back row is different than a ticket that's perhaps a backstage pass included with it, or something that would allow you to have a lifetime pass. The lifetime pasta pass from Olive Garden. It's a number. It's the card itself that you get for a lifetime pasta pass doesn't necessarily matter. The record of your member number in Olive Garden's database matters whether that card gets you free pasta or not. And so for someone who wishes to have lots of that pasta, that number matters. And so NFTs are like that duality of it can allow you to a membership or an experience, and you actually purchase it not because of how it looks or like what it can do as an art piece. You might hang it on your wall after it's done. If after you've been to the concert, it's often used as a stub, and so you may prefer a ticket that has a better graphic on it than one that doesn't, so that you can have it as a memento afterwards. But that's not the key purpose for those particular sorts of buying and numbers. So NFTs are like all of those. The trick is, NFTs are like all of these things at once. So like a vehicle identification number, they are permanently attached. The idea of a concert ticket could get torn and part of the number could get missing, and then you're in a pickle for figuring out how do you prove that it was actually the proper ticket. You can combine the permanency of a VIN with the collectability and being able to support your team piece of the collectible items. Artists can make and choose how many they wish to release into the world, and that exactly that many are created, like lithographs, and also like tickets. They can be used as membership or grant you access to things, and the people who are granting you access can choose, is that a one-time thing, a reusable thing, or even far in the future they could actually say, come back and now we've gotten a new purpose for this thing, because these things are permanent as well. So NFTs as a concept are all of those technology possibilities rolled into one. Plus, because they're based on a blockchain, they get some of the benefits of a blockchain piece. The ownership, let's get this guy to advance. There we go. Get both of my screens to synchronize here. That one in there. Okay. They are all these things, plus the blockchain technology that, because it's a public ledger and is immutable once it is in place, unless specific rules are followed, that it's rock solid of who actually owns the thing. Right now, our car ownership system is pretty rock solid of showing who has owned the car previously. We now have infrastructure where you can get the Carfax report of who has owned the car. But the idea of who owns all the Escher lithographs? Well, that's if you want to track down all of them, that's a more trickier thing, and it's in private databases and private collections and not publicly held. With the blockchain identifiers being permanent, counterfeits are very easy to tell. More similar to how a Mona Lisa counterfeit is very obviously not the Mona Lisa. An MC Escher, very good quality print might fool somebody, in terms of creating a counterfeit there. NFTs are very much counterfeit resistant. And the fact that they're fully digital means they can be everywhere at once. I've got the picture here, which is, I think we've all sort of seen these sort of pictures of car clubs coming together. That's sort of a common thing of the sort of people who collect similar cars. They might get together every once in a while. They all bring their cars and they take a picture of all the cars together, and you see several of one car together. But you never see this sort of a thing with all the MC Eschers. There isn't a club connotation or the ability or the willingness for people to take their Escher off the wall and go all together and get a picture of all the Eschers together. Or that idea of, hey, we all went to that Justin Bieber concert years ago. Do we want to get together and relive those happy memories? How would you even find those people? There's no good way to find all the people who went to that one concert way back when. So this sort of an idea exists currently for car collectors. But with an NFT possibility, because they're digital and they're everywhere, the idea of cars obviously can transport themselves. They're also a little harder to walk away with, so that there's a little bit less risk of theft or damage, while they're together. Whereas taking an Escher, to another location, it's the question of, will they get damaged or whatnot? Them being all digital gives them that additional bonus. One other brief piece here on the why is ownership or history important? That NFTs, I say, it's a bonus that you can say, where has it been? So here's an example of why, even if little things had the ability to show where they're from, where it can be a benefit. So the illustration on the right there is a Magic the Gathering card called a Fruitcake Elemental. It's a tongue-in-cheek joke Magic the Gathering card, which if you're unfamiliar with Magic the Gathering, the things you need to know about this one is the owning company who makes Magic the Gathering, Wizards of the Coast, they started doing these in 2006, that their Christmas gift to their employees was a custom-made card. So the only way you could get this card is if you were an employee of the company and this was their Christmas gift to you. Also, Fruitcake Elementals were the first they did of this. This was in 2006, and they've been doing it every year since. Fruitcake Elementals were the first. And so that's the sort of history of all Fruitcake Elementals. And so in general, Fruitcake Elementals are about $300 each. And actually, as you can see from that chart, they've spiked recently. So I've got one here. So this is my Fruitcake Elemental. And so, in general, this came up in our crypto chat recently, so I wanted to highlight this one of, yes, I'm in possession of one. This is the most valuable card in my collection, and I risked bringing it here today. Don't make me regret it. A piece of it there. But the illustration here is, okay, so in theory, I could say this card has gone up in value recently. In theory, the fair market value of this one is $300. But I would tell you right now, I won't sell this one. In the chat, I said I just wouldn't sell it, period. Let's say, to be reasonable, you would have to offer me at least $3,000, tenfold market price for this one. And so you'd say, why is this one worth tenfold what the market price of all other Fruitcake Elementals is? And so I can tell you, if you trust me, this one is mine. I worked for Wizards of the Coast in 2006, and this was the one that they gave me as my Christmas present from Wizards of the Coast. It's had one owner, me. And so it has a nostalgic value for me, so I'm reluctant to part with it that way. But the other piece of it is, even if you wanted it because you care about Brooks Boyd, Midnight Lightning, you want his particular Fruitcake Elemental, if that has value to you, the other thing is the moment I sell this, I could never find it again. This particular Fruitcake Elemental would then just blend into all the other Fruitcake Elementals. The only way I can say for certain that the history of this one is that it has had one owner and it is me, is that I don't let it out of my sight or out of my collection, piece of it there. And the problem with, even if I wanted to market in some way, like if I were to sign it, if I thought my particular Fruitcake Elemental would garner more interest and I wanted to sign it to market, well, that would actually probably reduce its value rather than benefit to it. There's no good way for me to put a tracker on this one that even if I wanted to follow and say, hey, who owns my card now if I sell it, it'd be very hard to do so without reducing the value of the card in itself. And so that piece, if this card were trackable, the idea of, hey, in the future I say, whoever owns my Fruitcake Elemental now, I'm gonna have a Magic tournament and you're invited if you actually hold you can get in for free if you're the current owner of that one. Those sort of little things could stack up for if everything can be tracked, then there's not even the possibility for nostalgia or for even more minor things like, hey, among friends, or even figuring out where is it now, or even that sort of knowledge possibility. So does everything need to have a history? No, it doesn't need it. If it did, and if it's a free feature, could you do cool stuff with it? Yeah, and people eventually will if everything is trackable that way. This is a lovely graphic from Twitter user Alan Hanna, which got shared in the Madison blockchain piece. So to kind of summarize the idea of what is an NFT compared to what is an NFT, as we're describing here, an NFT is both that number and the thing it's attached to. What a lot of the media has been pointing to is that one pink box, the JPEG that is attached to an NFT or the visual representation. But really, what is included in it when you get for free, when you buy that JPEG, is all of this infrastructure around it. The history, the trackability, who is the artist, where did it come from, and also the artist now knows who you are. You could be getting access to membership or events, sort of a thing. Sometimes the JPEG itself is not necessarily the most important part of the NFT. You get the whole package, and other people may value different parts of it as you're going into it. So that's the first half of my presentation there on what is an NFT. Do you have any? I'll pause there for questions on that sort of structural piece there. Do you have questions on that piece of what is it or what is it representing? Any from the Twitter or from the YouTube stream?
So from YouTube, this question is: in the future, what will be the way of connecting real-world physical assets to the blockchain as NFT? For example, will all physical assets be assigned a number, and from that number, an NFT is created?
So yeah, to repeat, the question is in the future, can we get physical objects being represented as NFTs? How do you get a number associated with a physical object? And I believe that's still an unsolved problem, or the question of, because there is no guaranteed way for me to, I could put a UPC sticker on my card, but that UPC sticker could be pulled off. Or we've got, tamper evident stickers, but tamper evident stickers can sometimes be worked around. So I think that idea that bridging the real world to the blockchain is still a work in progress. And that's why a lot of the NFTs that exist right now are completely digital. Both the thing that they are is a graphic, and the number is on a blockchain that lets them both be in the digital space as opposed to half in the physical or not. People bridging the idea of like car ownership or house ownership, things that we already have like a clear identifier for that's backed up by our legal system, will probably be the first to be more migrated in that direction. And then the more minor things of, what is the NFT or what is the ID of my apple that I had for lunch? We'll still need to figure out. Any other thoughts there? All right. Yeah.
How are companies like VeChain, who are working, as I understand it, with supply chains or the auto manufacturing, and then there are certain projects working in the food industry already. Are you aware of how they're attempting to solve that?
Sure. So the question was on VeChain or some of the others that are on the supply chain logistics. And as far as I know, I believe for most of those, at least as far like the labeling of the numbers, I believe it's mostly on like the packaging, because that idea of like when it leaves the farmer's hands, they have to put it in some sort of vessel. They can stamp the vessel and trust that the container is not going to be opened in transit. But yeah, getting it all the way to the consumer level of like the individual apple when it's sitting on a shelf in a grocery store, I haven't seen a lot of that, and I haven't researched that particular piece of it too much to know on that one. So. All right.
There's another one.
Oh, sure.
You kind of touched on this, but how are NFTs being valued? Rarity or popularity of designers?
There we go. So the question was, how are NFTs being evaluated? Rarity or popularity of designers? And I say the answer is both. So that gets kind of the idea of, the sports collectible. There are lots of different types of people who currently collect different sorts of sports collectibles. There'd be the person who wants all the rookie cards. There'd be the person who wants all of a certain team. There's a person who, wants the certain aspects of it. Bringing that aspect with the fine art piece, yes, people who like MC Escher would like, multiple of MC Escher's pieces, or people who like, in general, impressionistic ones would have a more wide variety of artists, but a more narrow band of what types of pieces they're getting. And so the question of value is the merging of all of those, of all the people interested in it for some reason, who's willing to pay the most. Right now, there's a lot of irrationality in the market because there's a lot of hype about it. And so it may be very hard to tell how much of it is just trying to jump on the bandwagon of the best new thing versus I actually think this is something I want to have in my collection long term. And that we'll need a little more time to figure that one out, I believe, is my opinion on that one. One more in the back there.
Yeah, is the NFT stuff you're talking about still underneath, and I don't want to get too technical here, is it still underneath the EIP 1948 proposal by the extension to 721?
Right.
Is this still a draft?
It's the question, getting a little technical on all of the NFT concept. The Ethereum blockchain has a couple of proposals, which would be the Ethereum Improvement Protocols, the EIPs, or the ERC, the requests for comment, which are the technical ways of adding on to the Ethereum infrastructure. The most common technical layer for NFT is an ERC 721 is the name of the technical standard that most follow. There's some newer ones like the ERC 1155, which allows developers to do more specific things with it. But most of the ones are built on, that original idea was ERC 721, was kind of defining the idea of essentially this, let me go back to this particular graph, that idea of, well, what are all the critical components that really all non-fungible tokens need to have, or what is a good base set? And that kind of was defined with ERC 721. There's some newer ones that offer, like, oh, think there should be a different base set of adding on a few more things. The number you said, I'm not quite familiar with that particular one, but it's the same idea. Oh, yeah.
But the reason I'm asking is I can't tell what's supposed to be used.
Sure. So the question was, so which should be used? And the answer from a developer is the right tool for the job. So what most of these are is, yeah, a base set. ERC 721 is the common base. If you have a use case that needs some other particular thing and you're going to always want it and you want to interoperate with others who also do that thing, some of those other standards are good for that. And yes, I'll get into more of the how do you tell which one it is in the later part of the talk. All right.
What stops someone from cloning an image and just publishing it?
Sure. What stops someone from just cloning an image and publishing it? What stops them is the idea of checking the provenance. So that's the sort of situation like an MC Escher print. If you have an MC Escher print and you put it on a photocopier and have it, and then say this is an MC Escher as well, or even, I guess to stretch the analogy, you'd need to also be an artist and like try and submit it to a gallery and say this is also the same thing, or to find someone say who's trying to buy an MC Escher and say this is also an Escher, you should pay me money for it. The difference is, with the blockchain technology, it's very easy to check the numbers underneath. And because the numbers are permanently fused, as soon as you say, well, this one is number 79, and then another number 79 supposedly pops up, that can't be. We need to look at the history, look at where they came from. One of them has to lead to a dead end somewhere. And so it's the question of that history is there if you choose to look for it. Right now, the market is very hot, and a lot of people are jumping on opportunities without checking. And so there's a lot that can be counterfeit, and I think right now a lot of the consumer knowledge needs to be, how can you check? What is the ways that you can actually check those numbers or even see from a human perspective, peel back that idea, peel back the layer of these JPEGs look identical, where's the thing that's different between the two of these? And I'll get into that at the end.
All right. Can you mention the POAP again?
Sure, the POAP will be coming up in a few more slides again. We'll get that one. Or that one, I can mention note of the, go into the Discord, talk to the POAP bot, the keyword is midnight, and they'll give you a link for that. So that's what exists as possibilities for the technical space of what is an NFT. And so then we're back to this idea of, right now what's been hot is the NFT art. Anyone recognize, what's that graphic that I chose to stick over the top there? Anyone recognize it?
Beeple?
It's the Beeple. $69 million that one sold for recently at a Christie's auction. And that's why it's been in the news recently. So I've been indicating that the mainstream media is more focused on this one narrow area. And so let's take a look. Yeah, the NFT art area, it exists. It is a big area, and it is very hot right now. So yes, but the thing to realize is that concept of, are people actually doing their research of what does it mean? It's that balance between what are you actually buying? When you buy a fine piece of artwork off the walls, which we've actually got several here at 100 State, if you were to buy the piece of canvas that's hanging on the wall, you know the rights you get as a fine art owner is usually, well, you may put it on your wall, you could destroy it if you wanted to, and you could resell it. And most people would buy a piece of fine art either to potentially resell it or because they wish to enjoy it themselves. So the question is, why did someone buy the Beeple for $69 million? What did they actually get? And the one thing to realize is the person who bought that one does not get royalties. They don't get reproduction rights. Technically, the only thing they were guaranteed to get is a high-resolution version of the image higher than what is normally shown. They were given a secret link to a more high-resolution version, supposedly. We actually don't know that. People just said that that was going to happen. So really, was that worth $69 million to get a high-resolution JPEG? That's literally what the contract said you're entitled to. Well, for this one, okay, they were among the first to pay for an NFT, so it's kind of like the Bitcoin pizza. We're paying 10,000 Bitcoins for a pizza. They're a part of history. It's it's got that sort of prestige to it too. So was that worth it to the buyer? Possibly, for that piece. So when you're buying into an art NFT, Beeple's didn't include any sort of royalties or similar, that sort of continuing finance from owning this thing. In general, if you go and buy an art NFT, and there's many marketplaces for that now, from OpenSea or Maker's Place or Rarible, are getting a lot of people who have done fine art getting it turned into NFTs by just uploading their JPEGs and then selling them as NFTs. Most of them, by buying the NFT, it's similar to buying stock photography, in that you're allowed to use it for your own personal use. You could print it out on your printer and hang it on the wall. You can use it in your own projects, but you're not allowed to use it for commercial use. Usually, they're usually under that license, is what most of the artists have been doing. And then you are allowed to resell it, and most of these platforms give a portion of secondary sales back to the original artist. So most of these ones, when you're buying it, it's more like buying stock photography. And then we get back to that same idea of, well, if it's the same image that I can see on the marketplace, why would I buy it when I can literally see the JPEG and right-click download it? And yes, for the most part, when you're dealing with like a stock photography website, usually they would show you like a watermarked or small version first, and then would only give you the large version after you've paid for it. But still, the legal right, if you acquired a high-resolution stock photography photo, not by paying for it, you acquired it some other way, either by accident or by swindling, you're still not allowed to use it even though you have it. So it's the idea of the rights versus you can possess it. So right now we're in a space where a lot of people can get access to the JPEG, but mostly what the artists are giving away is the right to reproduce it. Technically, if you just download it, you may be not getting those rights. But also this is very muddled because some artists are doing it differently and there's not really a good standard yet. And so this particular leg of the elephant has grown really fast, and it's gotten it's grown very big without a lot of standardizing. And so there are some that are very good, and there are some that you get a very good deal on, and some that, wait, you're actually literally just paying for a JPEG, and the artist says they're also going to sell 500 more piece of it there. So it's a marketplace that is very volatile right now, both with what is it actually trying to define. So let's take one look at, there's been a few that haven't done things well or there's not standards. I'll give an example of one that I feel is very good, that they did it the right way. Oleksandra arm, and I'm sorry, that's a Croatian name. I'm probably mispronouncing parts of that. I'll say this sort of, whether or not you believe it's a good idea, the way she went about it is very good. Oleksandra created an NFT. It's available on OpenSea. And she has said, if you own this NFT, you have the right to choose for her what she tattoos on the inside of her right arm, from her elbow to her shoulder. Currently, she has no tattoo there. If you buy this, you get the rights to do it. And she's even clarified, it does not give you, or I will not pay for the tattoo to be done. You get to choose what the tattoo is, but you must also pay for what the tattoo cost is. And so that particular one, and let's pull this one up here. So the actual NFT itself includes a video of her explaining all this. She's a tennis player. The reason why you might want this is she's, in theory, going to be in more tournaments. If you wanted a business logo there, you might get the marketing piece out of it. But that she actually very clearly spells out, what you get when you buy this NFT. And what she would accept, like also because she needs to still be able to get into Wimbledon, nothing racy or that would get her kicked out of a tennis tournament can be there. So these sort of things are very good, of very clearly spelling out what do you actually get for the thing that you're purchasing. And as an example for another good example, I'm going to kick it right back over to Merriam-Webster. They're the ones who defined it very well. And the wonderful thing is they made the definition an NFT. So when they added NFT to the dictionary, they NFTized it. So there is a identifier that says who owns the definition of NFT in Merriam-Webster. But they also very clearly spelled out if you own the NFT, you don't get to redefine what NFT is. The rights that you get when you own the definition of NFT is in the actual dictionary. After this blurb that defines it, it actually says this definition is owned by blank. And when they print it, it will actually say whoever the current owner is. Right now, it's the Art of the Internet Group, AOI, owns that NFT, and so now any dictionary printed with that will have this definition is owned by AOI as part of it. So that's what you get if you choose to own that particular NFT. Question right there?
For the ARM example, how is that an NFT? Like, couldn't that just been an advertisement through CAD?
Sure. So the question was, for this particular one, why NFT? Or this could just as easily have been done, oops, and I lost my sync here for the people in the group. There we go. So for this one, why would she go for an NFT? She probably could have just advertised and said, yeah, I'll be taking bids. It'll be on, she could have done it at Christie's or whatever, some sort of, other auction. Her choice to do it this way possibly could have done something to do with it's instantly global. It was relatively easy to do. And also that history and provenance, because she set it up where she will get secondary sales if the person who currently holds it seems to have not redeemed it. She doesn't have a tattoo there. The person who has it might be wanting to resell it, and she'll get more funds for that later. And that sort of idea of the rights as opposed to, I'm going to tattoo my arm right now, who wants to choose what it is? So that's sort of like time shifting the choice.
I guess it's a physical arm, not a digital thing, so I guess that's...
Sure, oh yeah. So getting to it's a physical arm, not a digital one. So this gets the idea of, can you put an identifier on a physical object? And I think because she is a celebrity, we know who she is. If this were just Jane Doe's arm, that might be harder to even identify if you got the right person. If you've purchased it, did you get the right person piece of it? So yes, could this have been done a different way? Yes. Possibly she chose it for the hype. Possibly she chose it was easier to go this route than using some other more traditional means. All right, so an NFT can be, showing the actual terms there. One area of NFTs that I think have been very successful in how they've been managing the things are game assets. In this age, we have a lot of games where you can pay for upgrades, you can pay for skins, or you can pay for additional perks that are given in the game. In the idea of a lot of these blockchain games, the assets that you own, some of them have been turning into NFTs, which then moves them up to this layer of, on the blockchain, they're public. And so, while that one on the right is from a game called Gods Unchained, which is very similar to Hearthstone or Magic, sort of a game where, yes, you're casting spells, it's doing a thing. This is a particularly rare one, it's a gold frame. You probably, if you were to buy that Blessed Chimera, you probably wouldn't buy it just for the artwork. You might enjoy the artwork, but you probably wouldn't hang it on the wall or try to print it out huge and hang it on the wall. That's an NFT you would buy because you play the game and you want to actually play the card. If you actually download their game and load it up, it will scan your wallet and say, oh, you've actually acquired a Blessed Chimera, let me add it to your inventory in the game. They are ones who definitely will check the provenance and say, you have a real Blessed Chimera, you don't have just a random JPEG that someone uploaded. Their code, their application is built to only accept valid identifiers that they've been able to put in. It's relatively transparent to the end user if they've actually got a real one for that purpose. And so those give you benefit, not necessarily as artwork, but in a niche area of, they're more similar to like a concert ticket in that way of, because I know I'm wanting to go play this game, this has value to me because I want to have a more valuable card. The other two on the side are on the left side are from a game called Neon District. The Neon District has got two different sorts of things which I wanted to highlight. One is that one on the left, which is a little droid sort of a thing. The graphic, if you go on a marketplace and you go to buy this thing, it would look like that. It's a little helmet or a little droid sort of a character, and in the game it would look rather similar if you were to actually apply it to your character. And so in those situations, yeah, the thing you buy looks the same as it does in the game, and you may buy it because you like it like a skin for a lot of the modern games. Same with the Blessed Chimera. If you buy it, when it shows up in the game, it looks like that. But the one in the middle there, with the golden key, it doesn't look that way in the game. That one is from Neon District, what they call a founder's key. This was something that they launched when they were actually fundraising for their game and wanting to gain interest in it. If you go on the marketplace and go to buy it, they look like that. There's sort of a futuristic looking door key piece of it there. But what it actually grants you access to is pre-release information. It grants you, when they're in like a beta phase, it granted you access to forums for giving feedback on the game, gave you access to pre-release builds and being able to be part of the game's development piece there. So while those founders keys do have a graphical component, most people would not buy it because they like the look of that graphical component. They would like it because when I go inside this game, it's a VIP pass. The game now instantly recognizes I am a different category of user. It doesn't necessarily have a visual component necessarily, but it grants access to experiences different than the other areas of the game. And so that's an area that has been blossoming, that idea of the game assets that you can take out of the game. And so now there's one, even if people who had a founder's key for Neon District, another video game could say, hey, we're going to make something similar, and we want the people who gave feedback on Neon District to also give feedback to us. So if you have one of their keys, come on over, we'll also grant you VIP access. Because of that public ledger idea, they can do that. That's why a lot of the games are switching to that idea of, if it's an actual NFT and not just a record in their database, it's now a public item that can be moved between games. That also then might be, you might want to pay a little bit more if your Blessed Chimera could not only be in the Gods Unchained game, but if your Blessed Chimera could also be your pet wandering around The Sims. You might pay a little bit more for it to acquire it. One other NFT area that's booming is the idea of virtual real estate. There's many virtual worlds that have been blossoming recently. Lower right is cryptovoxels, lower left is Decentraland, and top right is the Sandbox. And for all of them, if you were to go shopping and actually buy the thing, you'd see the graphic that's kind of on the top of each one. Where'd my cursor go that I can point out? So like in the Decentraland one, that graphic on the top with the red square, if you go to a marketplace, like that's what you're buying. To which someone would say, well, why would I want to buy that? It looks like a horrible Google Maps image. If I could get a better top-down view of something else, why would I want to buy that picture of that red square? Well, because the graphic in the marketplace doesn't represent the experience in the game. When you load up the actual virtual world, or actually in Decentraland's and Cryptovoxel's case so far, they're web-based, so you don't actually need an executable separate. When you go to that space, it's a 3D world, and it's actually terrain that if you are the owner of, you can choose what buildings and experiences are there. And so these parcels of virtual land, the graphic that's attached to them is very different than the experience and what they grant you access to, in the same way that a top-down Google Earth view of your house is not your house. And also if someone goes to Google Earth, takes a screenshot of your house from the top down, they don't get to say, haha, I own your house now. It's like, now that's not the reason why I might have a satellite picture of my house, but that's not the reason why I would have the satellite picture of my house to prove ownership of my house. That's a side perk of owning my house. And so within these have each been growing. The Sandbox is one where they don't actually have a client yet. They're still working on the view. They've been selling land for a world that doesn't have a viewer yet. Or they've been showing demos of it, or there's some tech ways you can see what it potentially will look like, but the actual interconnected world doesn't exist yet. But still people are hyped about it. And so it's also a way for them to raise capital as they've been selling off their virtual real estate. They also have been selling other NFTs, like a dragon, which you can put in your virtual land. Some of the, like Cryptovoxels or Decentraland, there's less, you can bring in NFTs from other spaces. But Sandbox is doing a larger part of their economy is this idea of like an NFT inside an NFT. So you can only put a dragon on your land if you own the land and own the dragon. And the game will check for both of those. And if you have that particular unique combination, then you get, the effects are magnified. So these sort of like chain reactions are building upon each other is possible as well when everything is open and can be done that way. It also means that people who are designers of dragon models, as opposed to people who are designers of the world space itself, can both coexist in a marketplace and both make a profit off of Sandbox sort of assets. So that's one that's been growing as well. Taking it one step further, synchronized, there we go. Mirandus. only seen it written, haven't actually heard someone say it, is another world that doesn't actually exist yet. They've given promo shots like this, so it's going to look like some sort of medieval, block-filled landscape. But the same way like Sandbox has the idea of an NFT within an NFT, they take it even a step further because the NFTs they've been selling include the idea of a deed, not just to one plot of land, but to a town. So you can buy the Castle of the Air, which includes the keep and the surrounding farm hamlets. That the thing, if you buy it in their marketplace, it looks like this. It looks like a piece of paper with a castle on it. And what they've shown as a rendering, it would look something like this of it's actually a plot of land, and each of those colored squares in there, someone else could build a building on, or you could rent out, sort of thing. So you're actually buying an apartment complex, sort of an idea that you could actually be making money by renting out your space. So again, an NFT inside an NFT inside an NFT that will make you money if someone else chooses to put their NFT inside your NFT. And so these sort of chain reactions are possible within the marketplaces, even for something that doesn't exist yet as a tactile game piece of it there. One more NFT that I think has been relatively successful, MoonCats, which is, as I would say, actually owning a number. For all the tongue-in-cheek things of why would you own a number? And also getting to the, well, how is the number attached to the object? One of the unique features of the MoonCat project is that the cat is the number. Or rather, the number that you actually own, you can see the example cat that I've got there, 00571281E7, is the number that if you purchase it, you get that MoonCat. And the reason is, each portion of that number is like DNA, and it actually tells you how that cat is going to look. It's not that there's a cat image and a number and the two got merged together in some database. The red, the green, and the blue tells what color the cat will be. If that E7 were switched and were 7E, that cat would be a darker shade of blue. And so you can't have that particular image on a number that would be 7E because they wouldn't match. The highlighted part that's the 5-7, which is kind of exploded into the rest of the visual there, is how that 57 actually expands into what pose the MoonCat is in. If this particular one, the last two there are 1-1, which defines the fact that it's on the down on all fours pouncing sort of a pose. If it were a 1-0, it would be up on its hind legs, which was some of the examples that I showed earlier. So in this one, if you buy a MoonCat, you are literally buying a number. And also that's cool. It's the number actually is the DNA sequence. Some of the other sort of virtual pet ideas have grown with that idea as well. There's a racing horse game, Zed Horse, the CryptoKitties, which also lets you breed them and mix their DNA, and that derives what sort of a cat will result from breeding two different CryptoKitties is based on the DNA of the two parent ones. So there are several NFTs where the number is the NFT, and there is a way to then view what that number looks like, which is a provable way to link those two together based on the algorithm that's defined. This DNA must lead to this graphic. Yes?
Hey Brooks, who owns that specific MoonCat?
That particular one is not mine. That one wasn't,
Okay.
not that one.
That was yours.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
The other two I showed earlier were indeed mine.
Okay.
So what can you do with NFTs? And you can have a POAP. Here's the example. Here's the POAP that you could own if you've actually followed those instructions. It's the Midnight Taught Me Something POAP for this particular presentation. Proof of attendance protocols, tokens, NFTs, are very similar to concert tickets in the idea that it's a little bit reversed, where most of the time with a concert ticket you have the one, or it lets you in once, and then afterwards it becomes a memento. It's a ticket stub, it's a memory piece of it. POAPs are mainly that second half. You get it at the event, like right now, and then forever after it is a representation that you were at the event. It is your proof you attended. It could just be a nice memory. You may like the graphic. It's got my MoonCat in the corner. You may want it just for that. You may want it because you're collecting dozens of POAPs. I know there's a few people in the room who just do that. You just want them because it's a POAP. Or there are things, once they are registered of who has this particular POAP from this particular presentation, I could send out a call at a later point in time saying, I'm giving away something and only people who can enter this raffle are the people who have been to one of my talks. And so you must have this POAP or one from another talk that I've given. The POAP community, or the development team of it, has created tools where you can create raffles for people who have been or who hold particular POAPs. There's now some art projects where you can only draw on the shared canvas if you hold particular POAPs. So the idea of you've attended a thing and now it's not just a memory, but it can actually grant you access to another event at a future point in time is the idea of the POAPs there. And so as of right now, we don't know how many of these POAPs for this particular event will exist, because people can still claim them right now if you haven't. But as soon as this event is over, from the chronological live stream perspective for tonight, then that won't be claimable anymore, and only that many will exist. And the POAP system, the infrastructure that they've created, will enforce that. So what is that worth to you? I'm giving it to you for free. But there will only ever be maybe 50 or 100 of them. Is that worth anything? I said I'm going to potentially do something with it in the future. Is that enough incentive for you to hold on to it for a while and see what I do with it? Maybe. So that idea of not all NFTs need to be huge, gigantic, $69 million sales. A lot of them can be slow incremental improvements, or something that you get and acquire and can benefit your life in a small but significant way in the future there. But they're all based on that same technology of, if you can track it, if you know exactly where it is and who has it, what do you want to do with it? Is there. I'll throw that up one more time for the instructions for it. Are we still having anyone having problems claiming it? All right, good, smooth sailing there. All right, so those are the examples of what I would say are other parts of the elephant that, if you weren't aware of, I would encourage you to become more aware of. The last section of my presentation here will be more investigating how do you look into NFTs. On any of these sort of examples that I've given of what I would call like good examples of NFTs, any questions on those come up? All right, done for the chat there. We'll move on to this one. Okay, so this one, I'm gonna need to switch to, I'm gonna look awkwardly over my shoulder here. Let's see, so we got that one. Oh, actually, I didn't show this one when I mentioned it. Yes, the definition of the NFT, it is actually a video. So if you own it, you get a cool video. If that matters to you. That might be a reason why you would want to own it. But again, yeah, they lay out very clearly what are the rights you get when you purchase it. And of course, them being a big dictionary, big website, they have a whole page of legalese on what you get when you own this thing. And as much as legalese is not perhaps intuitive for a lot of people, it is also good to have that as here is the legal definition of what you own if you purchase this NFT. Okay. So I pulled up, let me pull this one back here. Two big tools that I'll highlight here as kind of an introductory option for looking at verifying or just finding out more information about an NFT. So at the beginning I was talking about the hype around some of the art ones are you should dig into it a little bit to figure out what are you actually getting and is this the actual real one. One of the tools, or all NFTs, or most NFTs at this point, are on the Ethereum blockchain. And so there's a lot of tools that let you inspect stuff on the Ethereum blockchain. They're usually called block explorers. And so I'll highlight this one here. Etherscan is one that lets you look at a particular location on the blockchain, which would be an address, where a smart contract would be stored, and be able to inspect information about it. It can be daunting to just browse Etherscan because it lets you see everything. It sees the worldwide global ledger of everything that everybody is doing. So likely what you would want to do for using Etherscan is to use it as a place to check if someone claims I have this particular NFT from this address, that you can go to it and double check, is that actually the case? There are other block explorers as well. So if you don't trust Etherscan, or even if you want to just double check the double check, there are other ways to do this. I'll use Etherscan as an example because it is fairly popular and has a decent reputation for being trustworthy, that it is indeed showing the real ledger and is not doing some malarkey of hiding the truth, even in looking at this lower level of the blockchain. So to give an example here, if I were to say, one of the things that the MoonCat community did recently was a call to wrap their MoonCats so that they could become more compliant with the modern technology. MoonCats were actually created in 2017 before a bunch of standards were in place. And so one of the things that they were called to do was to say, you should acclimate them, which is to wrap them in a new contract. The information for that one, and let's see. Yeah, I want to grab my, if I can get my thing here. There's some deeper technical information from this, and so if we want to actually check what's going on there, if we trust that with our normal, or as our web browsing skills know, when you're wanting to check and make sure that a website is who you think it is, you check for the SSL certificate, you check the domain, make sure if you believe you are on the correct website. So this is indeed the MoonCat Rescue Project. They have published here, this is the actual address that we say this acclimator is at. So let's double check that. So there is actually a link, which you can't quite see there, is leading to Etherscan, but let's actually do it manually instead of trusting that link. I'm going to take that address and go up to Etherscan. That one's not Etherscan, that's the next tool. And if we paste that one in there, and it'll say, oh yeah, there is an address with that particular key. Let's actually take a look at it. Etherscan then says, oh yeah, this is a thing, and the contract is called Acclimated MoonCats. So there's your double check of the website says it's over here. Etherscan says, well, actually looking at the low-level code, this thing calls itself Acclimated MoonCats. That's good. Those things merge up together. This particular contract being following that standard we talked about, the ERC 721, Etherscan knows how to interact with it. And at a low level, actually, Etherscan lets you say, hey, if you're a developer and you want to see exactly what they're doing, here's their code. So also very good for open communication. You as a normal user usually don't have to delve into this, but it's there for people to audit as well. But also because the code is there, this button up here of read contract, Etherscan has made the ability that it can actually interact with the contract. The code defines, hey, here's a function, which when you call it, it does a certain thing. One of the key things that the ERC 721 standard says is we need a way to tell if there's an address that Brooks owns, we need to know how many of the thing Brooks owns. And so they decided, oh, the function should be called balance of. And so indeed that exists here in this contract. If you were to put in your own address, it would then tell you how many of this asset you own. That's one for if you already own it. If you're investigating an NFT, one of the key things that an NFT has is, just like a sports card, has the metadata that's somewhere else. A part of the standard is to say they should have a URL or a URI of where you can find more information about it. And this one you can see built into this contract, there is a URL that for each MoonCat there is a URL where you can get more information about it. Rather than go through it, I actually know the traits there. And to pull up things like, oh yeah, it looks like code, it's JSON, is the actual technical definition of it, but it also is relatively in English. You could probably pick out some key phrases in there to figure out, is this actually what we're dealing with? And I put up traits for cat number 0. And so the idea of, okay, if someone says they're selling MoonCat number 0, is it actually MoonCat number 0? How can I tell what actually is MoonCat 0 supposed to be? Oh, it's supposed to be a pale, chartreuse, grumpy, tabby MoonCat. If what they're showing me is not that, I know they're not telling the truth. So Etherscan lets you get at these very low-level pieces of it. One thing you may have noticed out of it here, there is actually the image for the asset is part of this metadata. And so there, more human-friendly. Is the thing they were showing you sporting that particular appearance? If so, much more likely that it is indeed MoonCat number 0. Piece of it there. So those are some of the tools that you can look at. Those are very low level on the blockchain. Most all tools you're going to look at, like OpenSea or your own wallet, are using these hooks to actually show you what the NFTs are. If for whatever reason you're questioning it, that's how you can actually get into that low level too and actually find, well, this is the URL it's supposed to be. Is that actually what it's showing me? Yes?
Question, if Etherscan was blocking or not showing full data chains or transfers, is there any deeper layer to check
So the question was, if Etherscan is not showing or is not going deep enough, is there another layer to check? Etherscan is a website that's looking at raw Ethereum data. The only level deeper would be to run your own Ethereum node and do the queries yourself. Etherscan is querying an Ethereum node. That would be the low-level JSON RPC calls. So now you'd be down at the level of code where it would be transferring JSON, and you could get that off of your own Ethereum node if you didn't even trust the node that Etherscan is running and querying the data on. So yes, there is technically one level lower, but now you're into the level of you need to be writing your own code or like running your own server in order to do it. So Etherscan is about the lowest you can get conveniently at this point. So Etherscan is about the lowest, and it's a block explorer. Other block explorers do similarly. The one other tool is OpenSea. OpenSea is a very popular marketplace for things that are ERC 721 compliant. The developers of OpenSea, by them writing code that just says, oh, we're going to expect these sorts of functions to exist because those are in the standard, they are instantly compatible with any of the ones that people try to spin up that are ERC 721s. And I'm not sure which URL I was trying to load with that one. Oh, that piece, okay. So this, coming back to the idea of this was the tab that I had opened that was still to the acclimated MoonCats contract. So we still know this particular contract ID is supposedly the acclimated MoonCats. Etherscan gives you a very technical sort of overview of it. Let's go into OpenSea, and if we give, I believe this was still work. Yep. So if you actually paste that one in, it actually says, oh, by the way, that one has a name. We know about that one. It has a name. It's called the official acclimated MoonCats. So now we're like one layer up of OpenSea makes everything look pretty. And so now you can see the exact same things. Here's all the acclimated MoonCats, but we're going to show you the graphics. We're going to show you the traits on it. You can then looking down and see, okay, I only want the ones that are sleeping. So filter it down to those sorts of ones. So that OpenSea operates at that level. You can, of course, double check these things at exactly the same way that we were showing previously. This particular one that I randomly clicked on is number 55660. That same API endpoint I could go into, put that number into it, see does the graphic actually match this one? Is OpenSea actually giving me the proper graphic for this proper ID? And this gets the idea of also copyright, or counterfeit, the other C. You can see the way that OpenSea gives this URL. It actually has, and on my stream it's a little bit cut off on that one. I'll describe it for that one. In OpenSea, the actual URL includes the contract address and the asset ID, the token ID. And so that's a very easy way, even if you don't know what to search for in OpenSea, you could actually probably reconstruct the URL pretty easily of which collection, contract is it from, and which ID is it. And they'd be able to show it. Lost my cursor. One of the pieces here, let's see what I want to show. I closed my tab. Let me reopen this one that I wanted to show as well. Because we had the example of the Beeple, the everydays. So this is, how do we know if we found, no, I don't want to. So this is that, supposedly, that one asset that sells for $69 million. So we can now recognize it from the newsreels of, what does it actually look like, this photo mosaic. But how do we find it on the blockchain? And so for this one, I've gone to Christie's website, at christies.com. It has their HTTPS. I trust that this was a website created by Christie's. I knew from the newsreels it was indeed Christie's that sold it. So that all seems to be in line. And actually within there, they do actually say, and there's the whole artist statement and whatnot, you probably scrolled right by it, there is the smart contract address for where this particular thing is. And it says, so it's at this address, and it's actually got this token identifier. Earlier, this wasn't working on OpenSea, but the idea of you could then take that to Etherscan, plug in that address, does this token exist, and who currently owns it? So we can actually say, okay, wish to go to this one. We have my tabs here. So if it's at that address, and indeed it is a contract, it's a collection called maker's token. And for that one, I wish to read it, and I wish to, where is that actual number? 40913. To say owner of that particular token. And say it's currently owned by that address. We don't know who, you may not know particularly who that address is, but there's the actual ledger, and you're getting at the very lowest level. We're dealing with account numbers, we're dealing with the actual identifiers. You can trace that provenance of where is it owned at this exact moment. So again, if you're looking for a very low level, Etherscan is a way to get some aspect into it. Slightly higher level, OpenSea gives you some more visuals as you're trying to do that sort of a research. And as I mentioned, there are many other marketplaces. OpenSea is not the only marketplace, and Etherscan is not the only block explorer. Those are examples of a category of items which can be used for research for those particular pieces. That makes sense so far? All right. So then, pop quiz. There's a thing. And I'm going to say that's a piece of artwork, and I would be willing to offer it up, maybe. The question is, what would you offer me?
5 ethers.
Someone's going very high. 5 ether for this one. The question is, do you even know, first of all, what is this? You can take a wild guess. What is this NFT? I say it's an NFT. What is it? It looks like a MoonCat. Are you sure? This might be a custom midnight, piece here. Also, I showed some examples. I did it briefly in OpenSea, but so far in my presentation, all the MoonCats that I've shown were all standing up. This one's laying down. Is actually laying down a pose that MoonCats are allowed to be in. That might be something you want to check. These sorts of things. So again, before you start throwing around a whole bunch of ETH on something that might be just a complete counterfeit, I would urge you to think of it like a collectible, or even like a collectible that you don't necessarily collect yourself. That's one of, even if you're not an expert on baseball cards, if someone offers you, hey, I'm going to offer you a really good deal on this particular baseball card, there's some double checks that you can do. And indeed, if I told you, oh yeah, this is a MoonCat, it's at that address, and it's that particular ID, and it has that particular DNA, which we talked about as part of being a MoonCat piece. Well, now you have more to check. That particular contract address, you can go verify it with the acclimated contract. It is indeed that particular one. And if we take that idea, 1310, go to this one, I can just actually change right on the URL, 1310. Let's see what OpenSea says. Is it actually that one? It is. I was actually telling the truth. It is indeed that golden colored laying down MoonCat. And indeed, OpenSea agrees, because I'm also logged into OpenSea right now, it's owned by me. So that is my MoonCat that I was being truthful on that one. But those are the sort of things that you can check before diving into something on those pieces. He amended it. 0.5 ETH is now the current offer on that particular MoonCat. So there. We'll come back to that one. So that is my presentation so far, or for what I had prepared. I'd be happy to take further questions at this point if you had other things that you would like to hear. Thank you. Very good. And so I'll be available to hang out. We'll be keeping an eye on the chat as well if there's other questions. If you're here in person, is there still food in the back? A little bit. Grab it. 2 pieces of pizza left in the back for those who are quick to jump on that one. Otherwise, yes, I'll hang out for some questions. Did I see? Was there a hand up, or was there? Or not?
Yeah, I had my hand up. It was about sharing the beginning part of the deck.
Yes.
I get a lot of questions about NFTs and what they are, and I think how you describe them between a VIN number on a car, a collectible sports card, a lithograph, and I think it was a concert ticket. I think kind of that integration of those 4 was really, really well done.
Thank you.
So yeah, kudos to you on that.
Thank you. So I comment on like the first section on all the things that an NFT is like, from the VIN to the concert ticket to the other pieces. And yes, in terms of slides, I'd be happy to, I'll add a link to, I'll probably put it in the YouTube stream once this is done and pre-recorded. I'll add the link to the Google Slides presentation for people who wish to link back for that and refine the information there. Happy to share. Otherwise, and indeed, feel free to contact me on the Madison Blockchain Discord. I'm also on the MoonCats Discord there to continue this sort of conversation. I'd be happy to answer other questions there. All righty. All right, well, we'll sign off the live stream there. Thank you, everyone, for joining.